Beautiful Borgers, you're here for a special episode about DePin and talking about Aethir's founder. Before getting right into the subject with Mark and Dan, the founder, and of course Alex, my brother, we're going to talk about this great alpha opportunity. The main takeaways of Aethir, as you guys know, DePin is booming. DePin is all about decentralized physical infrastructure networks, and these blockchain protocols, which is really good, is that it incentivizes essentially decentralized communities to build and maintain physical hardware with a token-based incentive. This is one of the hottest and most promising sectors in crypto. Why are people so excited about it? It's that this is the main reason, right? Until yesterday, well, there was definitely a lot of GPU that's consumed. But today, with ChatGPT just growing from a million of users, 100 million users within a fraction of days, and cloud computing with gaming, which is going just bananas with 2.8 billion people, the whole essentially physical infrastructure networks are just booming. We see right now that a gaming company such as Nvidia is now today one of the biggest infrastructure of all time with $2.2 trillion worth of market cap, as big as almost the entire crypto market. And these things are just booming by itself, right? What you have to understand is that with time, ChatGPT right now, we are writing and we're chatting, but tomorrow we'll be talking to it, and even further we'll have with the videos, it will be starting to animate these avatars, make a lot of great movies. And for this, you'll need more and more and more and more GPUs and cloud computing. If you look at the graphic processing unit, right? The GPU market size from last year to the next 10 years, it's $42 billion. In 10 years from now, it's 20x from that. Mark Zuckerberg for Meta just bought last week $20 billion of these GPU. The hardest thing right now is to get these NVIDIA chips. Essentially, these processors are the one to win the race towards AI, to automation, and be able to create great movies, to chat GPT-ish things, to cloud computing, anything that regards usage, essentially technology. They're really, and even Tesla bought over a few $1 billion of these things. Essentially, what you are buying GPUs today is the oil. It's essentially the oil or the water of the world. And this is why essentially DePin is a bit rewriting the rule book about this cloud computing. It's saying, like, instead of having a place where you're able just to rent your own essentially cloud computing, why not you could essentially start to look into the decentralized way to get this cloud computing, a way that could be optimize the machines in a better way, so when they're not used you could use different GPUs, but in a way that essentially the storages eventually could be completely betterly maintained and more secured. This is why I think so this is very, very easy, because if back in the days, we probably rented DVDs, right? Today, now we're looking at Netflix. So we, as a Netflix client, what we're doing, we go to AWS, right? And essentially, Netflix has to pay a lot of money to AWS, but sometimes it's not used in the best way, right? There's some users, maybe for Switzerland, we're in Dublin or whatever, there's some spaces. So imagine now you have a lot of decentralized places around the world, and essentially these nodes are running based on who is using at which time. So it could be amortized in a much more different, better way. And the network could incentivize as well eventually people to rent out some storage and to lend it whenever it's being used in a better way. So essentially it's how to democratize the GPU markets by enabling anyone to participate in this token economy. It's something that's very, very important. When you think about it, it's a bit like what's happening with Bitcoin, right? You're paying essentially incentivization to all the miners to run the network, right? Because each time you have a gas fee that you pay for a transaction, it goes to these people. It's a bit the same thing here, but not only for Bitcoin. It's for everything. And we know that there's only one way towards essentially this GPU market is the expansion, which is crazy. And right now, I would see what is very, very interesting about Aethir is we're going to talk with the founders, Mark and Dan, is that there's so many strong use cases and there's so many people that today are not able to essentially access the best games and play the games that they want. And tomorrow, thanks to Aethir and other different DePins projects, people will be able more and more to get access to these GPUs in a better way, and you could finally invest into this. So I think so, or provide your service as nodes in order to offer these services. So I think this is where it gets very, very exciting. We know that Render today is one of the most exciting projects. There's Helium, of course, and there's many others. And what I like about Aethir is that this is a new kids on the block, but as the team will tell you, they're not that new. Borgers, beautiful Borgers, here today. We're with one of the most exciting and promising project within the DePin ecosystem. It's all about Aethir. Obviously, you guys heard about it on Twitter, and now you're probably going to have the investment opportunity to run some nodes through that. So I'm very excited to have both co-founders today with Dan and Mark, and of course, my brother, Alex, always here with us. Not from your childhood, but from where we want to start to why did you get to create Aethir and what's the strong mission that drives you that every morning you wake up and you feel that it's going to be a new awesome day.
Yeah. Quick background about myself. So my name's Mark. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at Aethir. I started my career in infrastructure building, right? Primarily in the power and oil and gas space, building kind of mega projects in some of the most remote places in the world, right? Middle of the desert, middle of the ocean. I did that for the first 6 or 7 years of my career before getting the entrepreneurial itch. I founded my first company. It was a biotech company. I developed a series of sensors that had some medical applications and raised some money. I had kind of 2 divergent paths at that point. One was, head to a startup ecosystem like New York or the Bay Area. And the other was head to China, get close to manufacturing, reduce the iteration cycle that I had from an engineering perspective. And I chose the latter, right? I chose to move to China. This was kind of, I guess, looking back, a pretty transformative inflection point in my life. I didn't really know it at the time. It was just a bit of an adventure. But I moved to China, got close to manufacturing, raised some more money, worked on that project for a couple of years before exiting and feeling my way back into infrastructure. That had kind of always been my passion. I realized that through the life cycle of my biotech company. And there were some really interesting projects happening in China at the time. One of which was the Tencent Cloud Gaming Network, the largest cloud gaming network in the world. I joined a bunch of really smart engineers helping that infrastructure scale. And again, cloud gaming is essentially high performance GPU cloud. We took a look at the challenges that we were seeing in the scalability of that GPU cloud, and we thought, hey, maybe there's a solution in the decentralized hardware network space where we could kind of address some of these issues. And that was really the genesis of Aethir. We spun the company out about a year later, and the rest is history. From a mission perspective, Aethir's mission is to accelerate the world's transition to universal cloud compute, right? And I think that's best expressed when you take a look at gaming, right? So there's 3.3 billion gamers out there, 2.8 billion game on low-end devices, right? The cost of GPUs now is higher than ever before, right? The cost of accessing AAA gaming content is higher than ever before. Essentially, the barrier to entry for these 2.8 billion gamers is getting further and further away, right? And when you ask yourself, what's going to change? What's the status quo shift that's going to be able to bring those gamers into the gaming environment that you and I would consider totally mainstream? Or even flipping that on its head, what is the status quo shift that's going to give these big game publishers access to that 2.8 billion gamers, right? Really, in my mind, it comes down to kind of 3 things, right? First, you raise the GDP of the regions where these 2.8 billion gamers live, and all of a sudden they can afford gaming PCs and high-end phones. Not likely, right? The second is you have some form of massive chipset technology explosion, and all of a sudden you can produce really, really high-powered chips extremely cheaply, and everyone has access to high-powered independent hardware solutions. Again, really, really unlikely. The third way is you scale a technology we already have, which is cloud gaming, and you essentially take that technology to the regions where it would be most beneficial, right? All you need to do is solve the scalability challenge. And that's what we do at Aethir, right? We're solving the scalability challenge to a problem that I think is one of the most interesting problems in the world. And that is, how do you bring exciting gaming content to the vast majority of gamers? So there's a lot of different analogies to this in kind of the AI space as well. But at our core, we're really about democratizing access to gaming experiences, democratizing access to AI resources. It's something that I find extremely motivating.
Woo! My God, pressure on you, Dan. I think you just raised the bar really high, Mark. I don't know how you're going to follow up on that act. Pressure on you, my friend.
Mine will be super simple. I started in banking a long time ago, very long time ago, but my passion's been in gaming. I spent the bulk of my career after banking, joining the gaming industry, started at Riot Games, helped launch League of Legends, led our international publishing management teams, global infrastructure, global expansion. Then after the Tencent acquisition, transitioned over to Riot China, where I led operations. Then, a couple of years went by, a few friends started a fund in Web3, and basically then joined the fund leading the gaming and gaming infrastructure practice. That's where I met Mark and the other co-founders of Aethir, and what they were building really resonated with me because it solved a very real pain point that I faced as a gamer, and that's being tied to hardware restrictions when I wanted to choose what content I could play, right? And luckily I had a fairly higher end cell phone, but at that time I always faced I had kind of a shitty PC. I couldn't play the type of high-end games I would want to. And so what they were trying to do by kind of removing this hardware barrier and this barrier to access for players just really hit home for me. And it was a problem that I felt that particularly decentralization with a distributed hardware network solution could solve. So, yeah.
So thanks so much once again, Mark and Dan, for joining us. You guys are extremely busy these days, so it's really hard to get both of you at the same time. We're just going to look at the overall framework, guys, for you to understand how this interview will be conducted. We have what we call the SwissBorg Ventures magical 7 T's, as in the letter T. And it goes through specific criteria to see Aethir from the investor's perspective. Of course, this is purely for educational purposes, so do your own research. But here are some examples of the T's that we're going to cover. The first T is for team, second T is for tech, the third T is for token, the fourth T is the theme and the trend, the fifth T is traction, the sixth T is timing, and the seventh T in terms and conditions. We'll talk about the node sales. But without further ado, Sai, can I kick off with the first question, and a very difficult question for you, Mark? DePin is, of course, that's the fourth T, right? We're jumping straight into the theme, and the trend is a massive, massive trend, but on a very simple basis, rather than just explaining decentralized physical infrastructure network. What would be your personal definition, and has it evolved since?
I think I'll quote someone that I heard on a panel once that I think is a really great kind of simple tagline for DePin. And it's that DePin is a representation of the blockchain in the real world, right? It's physical infrastructure that's working alongside the blockchain physically in the real world. But I think something that a lot of people don't realize or often forget is that DePin as an acronym, as a definition, definitely quite new, right? It's something that didn't really exist a year ago. But actually, if you go back to the very roots of Web3, the very first project, Bitcoin, that's a DePin project, right? That is decentralized compute, right, in the real world, whether it's your friend's computer that's mining Bitcoin or a big crypto mining farm, right? It's physical infrastructure in the real world, providing resources to a blockchain objective. So DePin is actually a really familiar space to anyone in the Web3 community.
And maybe on that note, can you maybe, because like I remember when I got into crypto, I'm really into crypto. I was a massive fan of storage, for example, and then Filecoin and other ones that came. Why do you guys think that now this is the time and it's the era for DePin?
That's a good question, and I don't know the exact answer, right? I think that there's not probably one specific answer. I think that the AI sector as a whole, for example, is very much driving adoption and interest in AI in the DePin space. The fact that AI is so resource intensive from not just a compute, but also from a data perspective, and the value that decentralized networks can provide by aggregating either that compute or the data generation capability is really kind of putting Web3 and DePin projects in this really kind of interesting space where they have a huge amount of value to add to this kind of transformative industry that is really kind of impacting the world in a number of different ways. So I don't think there's one specific reason why DePin at the moment is kind of blowing up, but I think that its relevance to a couple of the key narratives, not just in kind of the macro environment, but also in the Web3 environment, are very indicative of why I think a lot of people are finding it a very, very interesting space.
I have a little something to add on that. And I think it's particularly why this cycle, DePin, has been pretty hot is I think you've seen a lot of the previous cycles, a lot of hot narratives, GameFi, DeFi, et cetera. But as more and more kind of retail and kind of Web2 adoption happens, folks are looking for real world applications, right? RWAs were hot for a minute there. And that's because people are like, well, how does this impact my daily life, right? And what turns out, like DePin is one like manifestation of that, where besides just the financial aspect, blockchain technology has the ability to really impact how everyday behavior manifests, whether it's through like Hivemapper, through Helium, through a bunch of different like storage solutions, and particularly now with AI and kind of a GPU resource crunch, this is manifesting in ways that impact everyday lives, and so it becomes top of mind for folks. Hence, it's easy to visualize the impact and becomes quite exciting.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Dan, that you're comparing this with Web 2, because that trend seems to also be happening in Web 2, right? With NVIDIA, which is more on the GPU side, but they flipped Amazon in terms of stock, market cap, right? With over $2 trillion of market cap and valuation. So my next question on that specific point, Dan and Mark, is when it comes to the GPU side of things, is it a bit of a race when it comes to being able to acquire that machinery? And I know that you guys did something that I find very, very interesting, is you focused a lot more on the institutional side to secure partnerships and have this access rather than focusing directly on the community. So you did the heavy lifting first on an institutional and business side before, which we'll talk about later, decentralizing those with the community.
Yeah, and thank you for kind of raising that. I think that when you look at DePin projects, particularly in the GPU cloud space, right, the end state for all of these projects is always the same, right? We all know where we want to get, right? It's this kind of hardware gig economy where anyone can kind of permissionlessly upload compute, permissionlessly access compute, just this kind of universal cloud compute environment, right? The end state for all DePin projects in the GPU cloud space is very, very similar. So the question doesn't necessarily become, what that end goal is. It's actually more about what your go-to-market is, right? How are you going to ensure that you're the project that has the longevity and the ability to kind of persist and be the one that's able to kind of take advantage of this really exciting, interesting end state. And that's where Aethir took a very different approach to a lot of other projects, right? I think when you take a look at DePin projects, traditionally, we have a tendency to aggregate consumer compute, right? Early on in DePin project life cycles, you have this chicken and the egg situation, right? Where you want to be able to convince hardware owners to contribute their compute to your network, but they want you to tell them and give them confidence that there's going to be demand and users for their hardware. But how can you show them that you have demand and users when you don't have the hardware for those users to operate on, right? So you have this really frustrating chicken and the egg problem that's really difficult to kind of address. Traditionally, what projects usually do, right, is they take their token and they go and they incentivize the community, right, to provide their compute. They say, hey, I've got a token, gamers in my community, designers in my community, people that have a desktop with a reasonable GPU, how about I give you a token and you add it to my network, right? Then these DePin projects, they aggregate all of this compute, they go to VCs, they raise some capital, and they start to kind of spin that flywheel. Now, that's a great way to kind of get the initial state of your network established, but it's a really difficult situation to kind of scale from because you've aggregated this really diverse and often retail-focused or consumer-focused compute stack that's really hard to package and sell to enterprise customers, right? It's really difficult to take a bunch of gaming PCs that sit in people's houses and package that in a way that meets the enterprise service, quality, and uptime requirements of a big compute buyer, right? And that means that a lot of these projects have kind of difficulty matching the compute they've aggregated with the appetite of these compute buyers. So this is kind of a challenge that Aethir kind of saw in the market very, very early on, and something that we chose to kind of address in a totally separate way. Like you mentioned before, we took the more difficult route, right? We said to ourselves, as kind of enterprise compute players, like we've been in the enterprise cloud compute space for a number of years. We knew exactly what these cloud compute buyers wanted, right? So we said to ourselves, all right, let's build a network comprised exclusively of enterprise capable GPU compute, right? 100% enterprise focused GPUs sitting and contributed in data centers capable of meeting the requirements of these large enterprise compute buyers. So this is obviously a kind of a more difficult path, right? It's harder to get access to these higher value GPUs, right? It's harder to convince the owners of those GPUs to contribute them to your network. But if you can kind of overcome that hurdle, which we now have, you actually have this compute infrastructure network that perfectly aligns with the demands of the biggest compute buyers in the world. And then you have this really, really interesting scenario where you can kind of push and spin the flywheel of your network at a scale that is extremely difficult to replicate if you've chosen a different sort of maybe more diverse compute aggregation philosophy. And this is kind of one of the reasons we've had a huge amount of success at Aethir.
And maybe it would be interesting to understand why you guys focusing really on the two specific themes, which is AI and gaming. Is there's any particular reason that you guys feel that this is a better sector, or it's just that you believe that's a greater narrative and maybe better to have more community members attracted to the project?
Yeah, I think very similar. I guess you could almost link this back to NVIDIA itself, right? If you were to go back 2 or 3 years, you would have said NVIDIA is a gaming company, right? They build GPUs, and GPUs are a gaming chipset, right? And only today, with this new kind of $2.5 trillion market cap, do we kind of look at NVIDIA as this AI company, almost with like a gaming hobby, right? The evolution of the GPU through its kind of life cycle, originally as kind of a gaming chip, to the kind of AI behemoth that it is today, is somewhat similar to the journey that we had with Aethir, right? We started in the cloud gaming space, right? The delivery of high performance GPU cloud in extremely low latency environments that are suitable enough that you can stream a game to a gamer, right? Because gamers have a hugely low tolerance for lag or performance issues in their gaming experiences, right? So we became extremely familiar with how to scale the GPU cloud, and kind of alongside the transition of NVIDIA into this AI company that it is today, we had a similar transition, right? We realized that we were the experts in delivering this specific type of resource that originally had a huge amount of gaming applications and now also has a huge amount of AI applications. So our path kind of was kind of synonymous with the path that NVIDIA took, because there is obviously that real alignment of kind of AI and gaming at that core GPU resource level.
And that makes a lot of sense because, when you look at games like Fortnite, they have to run X amount of servers, right? And they only have like, let's say 100 to 200 players per server. And that costs a lot of money, right? To run all these servers simultaneously. So I guess that's a big problem to solve, right? For most games, where they can obviously cut costs, but also have people running on the same servers so that they can play, with a bigger crowd, I'd assume. Dan, any thoughts on that, on the AI and gaming space being the core narrative for the beginning or the early days?
Look, it's just where the demand is coming from. The largest surge in adoption and interest, and coincidentally, it kind of pairs well with our expertise, right? Like we're sticking to kind of what we're good at, specifically on the real-time latency sensitive use cases, and we just see the biggest adoption now and in the near future, really on the AI and gaming side.
That makes a lot of sense. If I can move to the next T, which is technology. You mentioned, Mark, earlier that you had a different approach, obviously. So we talked about the enterprise side, understanding, what people are looking for when it comes to the storage level. And I know that a lot of people will maybe compare you guys to Render Network or maybe Akash or Filecoins. And there's probably space for all of us, right? I mean, people may have different specialties, and not saying that anyone's going to go to zero, because we're friends with a lot of them. But what do you gentlemen feel like you have as your core advantage, and how do you quantify it when you're comparing, for example, Aethir versus one of the other DePin or decentralized cloud compute plays?
Yeah, I think an easy kind of comparison to make between what we do at Aethir is with Render, right? Render is the OG when it comes to aggregating GPUs, right? And they're a really interesting Web3 project, because every time NVIDIA pumps, Render will pump. Every time Apple pumps, Render will pump. Every time there's an announcement about the Apple Vision Pro or something metaverse related, Render will pump, right? It's this great kind of proxy for a large amount of kind of interesting technology in the Web2 space. But actually, when you look at the delivery of the product that Render has when compared to Aethir, we're quite different, right? We have the same core resource, right? We both aggregate and utilize GPUs, but the way that we use those GPUs is quite different, right? Render, for example, is what we call a static rendering solution. Essentially, they work with CGI projects, gaming studios that are kind of building and developing their worlds, and large offline rendering work is very comfortably handled by the Render network. It's a great, cost-effective, time-effective way to have a big CGI file rendered, for example. Now, what's interesting, or what's different, I should say, between kind of Render and Aethir is Aethir also does rendering as it relates to how we serve gaming companies, but we deliver what's called a real-time rendering solution, right? And that's a vastly different situation or technology stack. Essentially, what Aethir does is we directly connect individuals that are accessing our GPU stack to a GPU resource, and we maintain a connection for the entire essentially gaming or rendering experience, right? Because if you can imagine, a real-time rendering workload needs a real-time connection with the user that's requesting that access. So our network's kind of structured in a much more kind of complex way because we do a very, very different type of rendering. And that's not necessarily something that Render would be able to build on top of the stack that they've kind of built so far. So I would say that whilst there are definitely comparisons that you can make between Aethir and Render, or Aethir and Akash, or Aethir and IO, we all kind of have very, very different specialties. And those specialties really kind of put us in very, very different positions when we look at the customers that we're serving. Aethir has this great advantage that we serve gaming companies alongside AI companies. That's something that no one else really does. But there's a lot of kind of depth to the type of technology that we have that kind of sets us quite apart from the other players in the space.
In some way, can I say that you kind of dynamically allocate the GPUs and the usage of the GPU, sorry, in a way that it's being more efficient, and therefore essentially, well, it is obviously cheaper for the users behind. Is that it pretty much the main difference?
Yes, there's definitely an element at play there that I think is worth kind of maybe double clicking on. When you look at decentralized networks, right, they scale in very different ways to traditional cloud networks, right? If you're a Google Cloud, for example, and you're looking to expand your network into a new region, you'll have this big upfront capital cost, right? You'll need to purchase a large amount of these GPUs, right? You'll then take these GPUs and you'll dump them into a data center in this new region you're expanding into, right? You'll put all of your equipment under one roof, right? You'll centralize it because that's the most cost-effective way to handle that equipment. That's how you benefit from the economies of scale, right? You can reduce the overhead, you can minimize the amount of team needed to kind of handle that much equipment. And you kind of have this now one centralized node location that's serving that region. The issue here, and this was actually probably the fundamental principle that sparked the genesis of Aethir, 2.5 years ago. But when you look at the GPU cloud in particular, what you realize is that one of the biggest determinants of performance within the network is actually how far a user is away from where that compute is happening. So if you think of a centralized solution with the compute being the center of the dartboard, the further you are away from that bullseye, the poorer the performance. So a small number of users that just happen to be adjacent to that bullseye will have really high performance, right? They'll have a great experience. But the vast majority will have a really poor experience. Decentralized networks operate very differently, right? And the core reason for that is that in decentralized networks, there's no incentive for that hardware to clump, right? There's no incentive for me as a hardware owner to put my hardware in the same facility as you, Alex, or as you, Cyrus, right? Essentially, instead of all of this hardware operating in the center of the bullseye, right? You actually have a greater distribution of smaller hardware nodes popping up all over the map, right? So then, if you imagine that dartboard analogy, instead of the vast majority of users having a poor experience, actually you have this distribution of nodes whereby as your network gets bigger, the number of nodes increases on the map. So the likelihood that you can serve a customer with a local compute service increases over time. So to your point, yes, decentralized networks actually are more efficient and faster, or at least they should be, as they scale, because we're able to kind of reduce the distance between a user and a node in a way that would be incredibly expensive to do if you tried to do this in a centralized manner. In many ways, decentralized compute networks have this kind of ability to mimic edge compute networks in a really interesting way without any of the cost disadvantages of edge computing. I'm not entirely sure whether this was where you were going with your point, but definitely this is one of the key reasons why decentralized networks in particular have such an advantage over centralized solutions.
Yeah, this makes so much sense because, there are many different statistics, right? Like if AWS shuts down on Ethereum, that 1/4 or maybe 1/3 of all their decentralized compute or the servers could go down, right? And then I guess also by decentralizing it with smaller capital and through the community, there's less risk than, like, for example, if someone's mining Bitcoin and Bitmain decides to shut down all of their mining farms. Does that make sense, Dan, or am I completely off target right here?
Sort of. It's more that like the network benefits by having widespread distribution, right? And because folks generally in their own local areas will have some costs that they're trying to recoup, they're willing to price things for lower just to get some marginal utility out of it. In addition, you can basically aggregate resources that have local pricing power that perhaps giant centralized entities don't when they move into a new area. And so when you aggregate all the like local benefits up, it provides an overall just cheaper access for the entire ecosystem along with better performance.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And I would love to move guys to the next T, which kind of will cover some of your USPs, your unique selling points as a differentiator, because we already touched upon this on a higher level. And I would love to move to the next T, which is traction. And you guys have very impressive traction. And I would love to throw some numbers at you, Mark, and just for you to kind of clarify and tell us on a high level what that means and why you think that matters most. But so far, and I don't know if this is the most recent data, but we know that you guys have 20x more GPUs than Render, 45 times X more TFL OPS, TFLOPS compute power, than Akash, 31x more infrastructure capital, 4,000 plus H100 AI GPUs. So this is all some very cool traction. In easy and simple terms, Mark, like what amongst these figures is the most impressive and unique to what you guys are doing at Aethir?
Yeah, good question. I think largely in aggregation, these points all have a huge amount of relevance, right? I don't think I could maybe necessarily cherry pick a specific number that is maybe more impressive than the others, but I'll speak to maybe each one, right? We talk about having 20 times more GPUs than Render. This is just a pure expression of the amount of GPUs we've been able to aggregate that have value to our customers. For example, Render, you haven't been able to kind of upload a node into Render for I think almost a year now, right? And if they had more demand, right, or maybe high utilization in the network, I would imagine that they would probably be looking to aggregate more compute, right? That makes sense to me from a market just flow perspective, right? For us, what we've managed to do, like I kind of mentioned earlier, is we've managed to match the type of compute that we want access to the demand that we have within our ecosystem. So as a result, we've been able to kind of hyper focus on aggregating the compute that we know we need. So as a result, we've been really able to kind of scale up the number of GPUs within our ecosystem in such a way that it makes sense for us to do that. So that kind of first number is really just a representation, like essentially of product market fit, right? Because we know that we've been able to kind of get so many GPUs because there's demand for those GPUs. So that's kind of the first number. The second number, this 45 times the teraflops of a cache network. This number, and actually the following two data points, the 31 times the infrastructure capital and the 3,000 H100s, they're actually very much interlinked, right? If you take a look at teraflops as a metric, right, this is essentially a measure of compute power to some degree. And the higher end the GPU, the more expensive, the more enterprise focused the GPU, the more muscle, the more teraflops, the more compute power it has access to. As you can imagine, we've had a strict focus on enterprise grade GPUs, aggregating enterprise grade GPUs, such that on average, the type of GPU that we've aggregated is really powerful, right? Because it's there to serve enterprise customers. So that's kind of why we have such a kind of greater capacity across our network than maybe some of the other players in the space. That is also similarly reflected in the value, the capital value of the infrastructure committed to Aethir. Again, enterprise-focused GPUs are going to cost more because the people that buy them are companies and tech companies and enterprises, as opposed to consumers. All right, so that's kind of why the infrastructure capital commitment is so much greater. And then finally, when you actually kind of look at the compute type that is needed by big enterprise AI compute buyers, they actively want access to a specific type of GPU, one specific type, right? And that is the H100, NVIDIA H100 GPU. You might have seen, Elon Musk come out and say GPUs are harder to buy than drugs. You might have seen Mark Zuckerberg purchase almost $11 billion worth of GPUs just 2 weeks ago. Both of these guys, both Elon and Zuckerberg, they're talking about H100s, right? When it comes to training and it comes to kind of enterprise training compute appetite, there's only one thing that these big tech companies want to eat, and that's H100s. They are simultaneously the most expensive and most powerful and most scarce GPU resource on the planet. And we've been able to aggregate, actually a lot more than 3,000, closer to 8,000 now within our network. And as a result of that, our network is a pretty hefty kind of GPU network, right? It has a lot of compute power. It has a lot of kind of capital value. And it is simultaneously really valuable to these enterprise customers as a result.
Very nice. I'll let you give you a follow-up. So I'm asking too many questions here.
Yeah, I think so. This sums it up. I think so. When you have the entrepreneur spirit and you feel you try to solve a massive problem that's from your end, and then you know that a lot of other people have that same problem. And here we're talking about billions of people. That's where you be very successful in this, and that's why I believe that DePin, but more importantly, Aethir, you guys are definitely on the right track for this. Maybe let's talk about now, how can the community participate within your ecosystem? I know you guys have your nodes that you'll be running. There'll be token in the future. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this side?
Yeah, I guess specifically, one of the most pertinent and readily available ways to participate is through our checker node sale. Within our ecosystem, there's this role of a container, which is the GPU, the kind of like the engine, but equally important to ensure a trustless, decentralized network. We have these checkers, so like inspectors or validators. What they do is they verify the uptime, capacity, liveliness, quality of service, ensuring that the containers, the GPUs, are meeting SLAs. Right, so a very, very important role in our ecosystem. So because we wanted to embrace kind of this Web3 ethos of making sure that everyone can participate, and knowing that like on the container side, not everyone can buy an H100, not everyone can deploy it in like T3, T4 data centers, then the way to engage the widest audience possible, the largest community possible, was by lowering the barriers of entry on the kind of the checker side, right? The validator side. And so through our kind of checker node sale, folks have the opportunity to purchase a license to operate as a checker within our ecosystem. And in return for operating this checker as a checker in our ecosystem, we've allocated 15% of our total token supply over 4 years to be distributed to checkers in our ecosystem. So, it's a pretty straightforward. We start with a very, very low price per license, and every so many thousand licenses or so, the price incrementally goes up. And as the price goes up and more checker licenses are sold, the total amount of licenses remaining decreases because we've capped it at 100,000. So essentially, if you want to participate, you can do so with your home laptop, or you can deploy these nodes on a VPS. It's extremely easy to do. We're also working with several node as a service providers to be able to provide the solution so that you can just delegate your license to them and they'll be able to operate it for you on your behalf. But essentially, this ensures that as wide and as diverse a community as possible can all enter, purchase this node sale checker node license, and then operate in our ecosystem, ensuring the high quality level of SLAs are being met as demanded by our enterprise customers.
Super cool. And just one last question to follow up on that. Mark, earlier you kind of mentioned Bitcoin with, proof of work, which does resemble Aether in many ways on the tokenomics side, right? With the staking and decentralizing the network, et cetera, et cetera. But because you guys hopefully will be one of the core layers to build really cool games and really cool AI dApps, et cetera, do you have any other, maybe not set in stone, but future utilities that you'll add? So for instance, Cosmos, you guys know every time there's a project that builds on Cosmos, there's some sort of airdrop for those who hold the Atom token. Or are there any particular angles that you guys are thinking about to have future utilities for the token?
Yeah. I think the way that we look at Aether, and I think I spoke about this a little bit before, right, is the end state for the DePin GPU compute space is universal cloud compute, right? It is a massive, holistic form of compute aggregation that has an almost infinite number of use cases, right? So when you think about our project, remember, it's really a go-to-market strategy differentiation, right? But that kind of entails that if here is where we are and this universal cloud compute state's up here, right? That means we have this path of kind of increasing not only decentralization, but also diversification of the type of compute that we handle within our network. So definitely we look to the future of our network as one where we can handle a much greater diversity of compute than we do today, right? The focus that we have at the moment is very much because DePin, as we're referring to DePin now, right? Not Bitcoin. DePin, as we refer to it now, is a new thing, right? So it means that we're very much competing on go-to-market and market entry and early stage aggregation. But as we kind of mature as a business, you can definitely expect Aether to start providing inferencing solutions for AI, right? Start providing solutions where consumers can contribute their GPUs to our network. They can't do it today, but they will be able to do it on our timeline, on our roadmap by around Q3 of this year. Also, one other thing that I think is really, really interesting and very special and unique to our network is when you go back to our kind of core origin story, right? It was cloud gaming, right? Real-time rendering. If you think about the evolution of AI applications, right now we talk to ChatGPT via text, right? We communicate with AI through a chat box. But we all know that that's not going to be the case forever, right? Very soon we're going to be communicating with AI through voice. And quite quickly after that, we're going to be communicating with AI avatars, right? The whole AI companion ecosystem, which we know is blowing up, right? Remember that on top of the basic AI inferencing work that needs to be done, if you have an AI avatar, that's a real-time rendering productization layer that needs to happen, right? You need to be rendering the look of that AI avatar in real time such that when they're responding to you with the inferencing generated prompt, right, the answer to the question, that their mouth moves at the same speed as the voice that's being generated from that text-to-speech technology, right? So Aether, with our cloud gaming kind of roots, is perfectly situated to scale this productization layer that we know will exist as the AI market and the AI application market matures. So you're going to see a lot more of Aether and what we do as we see just a broader maturity in the AI space in particular. So huge amount on our radar, a huge amount that we're looking to to kind of execute on, and sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit for sure, Cyrus. Isn't it exciting side to have like gaming and AI as two separate technologies, but also combined? A really simple and silly example, Dan. I'm playing Zelda Breath of the Wild. And one thing that really annoys me is I wish that the characters had some sort of AI functionality where they don't repeat the same text all the time, the boring stuff. Like I want to have a conversation with this old man here in the village, and I think the combination is exciting too, huh, Dan?
It's just a natural combination of the two, right? As you want deeper engagement in content, AI is going to have to fulfill the kind of need for this, right? And I think everyone kind of recognizes that the future of content consumption, entertainment, gaming will see a proliferation of AI solutions, right? For better or for worse. And that's why you see Hollywood coming up with new deals where like they're banning AI from writing scripts and whatever, because you're just going to see a huge surge in use case and demand of AI and all sorts of content.
100%. I mean, this space is only growing, and I have some graphs just in front of me that I talked in the intro just before this video. It's just a booming space, and the use cases are just bigger and greater. Regarding the token itself of Aethir, is the idea is to start rewarding people while they're validating these nodes, essentially, or participating in the nodes economy. How will then the token itself be used? Is it that people who will actually purchase this GPU power will need to spend as gas fees your native token? Is that how you guys have built your token economy?
Yeah, so everything consumed on our network requires the token. So when these enterprise clients need rendering services, when they want to train an LLM, when they want to host their virtual AI assistant being fully rendered in real time up in the compute on the network, they need to pay with our token.
Yeah, I mean, like I couldn't be more bullish about the sector that is just booming. The real use case behind it, the mission that you guys have, by the fact the team that you're strong entrepreneurs that have been extremely successful and different disciplines that now bring together all this great attire and is able to democratize in some way the infrastructure of today and tomorrow, which is AI and of course gaming through GPU usage. The token seems to be very strong and well thought. I'm full in. Alex, what about yourself?
I'm very, very bullish, and of course, not financial advice. I think the team has clearly shown that they've thought of all the angles. Just want to ask the viewers out there, how do you like this format as a general framework to essentially look at each project from an investor's perspective, whether you're into the checker nodes by buying NFTs, whether you want to hodl the token and stake it at one point? Let us know your feedback and we can hopefully recycle this. I must say, Mark, Dan, thank you so much for your time. Just for everyone to know, once again, we kicked off this show by saying that these guys are extremely busy at the moment. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate every single second you've spent here today with us.
Thank you so much for having us, guys.
Yeah, thank you for having us. And actually super thankful for all the support the SwissBorg team has given to Aethir and LFG, guys. Let's do this.
LFG, baby.
Absolutely. Let's go.
So you followed the 10 different teams. As you can notice, the team itself is great. They're really, really good people. The technology that behind is that he's been working in this field for a long time, and they really have a great way to decentralize essentially the offering of these different GPUs. They have a great network as well, which is in terms of business. The traction is crazy. The token has a lot of incentives for rewards, and it has a way where you have to pay for essentially getting access to the GPU. So it's a good, very chain link type of service. What to say more than that? It's that the token, if you look at this, so Aethir achieves this way on two mechanisms. Resource pooling, owners can contribute They're underutilized GPUs as Aethir network, effectively forming a collective pool of potent computing resources, meaning you could provide your essentially GPUs yourselves. This enables the global GPU distribution at a significantly reduced cost, democratizing access to advanced computation power. Or as well, the decentralized ownership. And I think so this is something that is very, very new, because the research polling, we've seen it with other projects. The decentralized ownership is that Aethir's model transcends the limitation to traditional ownership structures by enabling distributed resources possession. This lowered barriers to entry, new consumers, opens a new economic opportunities, and contributes to a globally diverse, interconnected digital ecosystem. So in some way, you are essentially able to rent or provide essentially purchasing power in order to then distribute your power that you're making. So in some way, it's a fractional ownership of the network, where essentially this enables you essentially to get rewarded for this. I hope you guys have enjoyed this new format again about these alpha opportunities. We definitely believe that Aethir is something that's very interesting to follow and to look into this alpha deal. So as always, be healthy, be wealthy, love our Borg and equity. Take care, guys. Bye.